Welcome to this explainer. I want you to start by taking a slow, deep breath with me. Just pause for a second. Listen to the silence that blankets the ruins around you. We are stepping into what we call the silent archive. And here, in this sort of cathedral of the Stoic soul, we don't look at decay as a tragedy. Not at all. We actually view it as a necessary purification. Because, let's face it, we live in an era where noise is basically worshipped as a virtue, and just hurrying around is mistaken for actual evidence of existence. But as we dive into this today, I really urge you to listen to that silence and prepare yourself to face a truly chilling truth.
I want you to confront this head-on. Seriously, look at your own hands right now. Think about all the things you spend your days chasing. Look at what you confidently call your achievements. Now ask yourself, how much of that is actually going to remain standing when the sun sets on the final day of this century? The chilling truth here, the one we really have to realize, is that everything you are currently clinging to might just be made of sand.
And that brings us to the core conflict of our entire lives. It's sand versus marble. We are so utterly exhausted by modern life, right? And it's mostly because we mistake all this frantic hurrying for existence. We build our lives on sand. We seek this super transient recognition, we rush through our days, and we are absolutely terrified of silence because it forces us to confront the total emptiness of what we've built. But contrast that with marble. Feel the weight of it. It's cold, it's hard, and it's completely indifferent. That is the nature of absolute permanence. The world has literally no obligation to be gentle with you. Time is a devoted executioner. It's going to erode every bit of brilliance, fade every laugh, and turn even the mightiest empires into fine dust. Marble represents that unforgiving, heavy reality that simply outlasts time itself.
So what actually happens when we keep choosing sand? Well, most of us get trapped in this brutal paradox known as existential debt. Think about it. You are spending the entirety of your metabolic gold, literally the most precious, finite energy of your life, to build castles right on the water's edge. You're craving recognition from people who are just as transient as you are. You are borrowing meaning from the crowd, from these flickering screens we stare at all day, and from the expectations of a world that was never ever designed to care about your peace. You're essentially borrowing from a void to pay for an illusion.
All right, let's shift gears. Part 1, the protocol of permanence. This is about becoming the architect of time. We are officially leaving the chaos of modernity behind and stepping into the very heart of the archive. Because within that absolute crushing harshness of time's erosion, a law of permanence actually begins to emerge. But to build a legacy that can't be erased, you have to make a massive mindset shift. You have to stop being a victim of time and start acting as its architect. To measure the strength of a soul, we apply something called the persistence equation. Now, do not view this as cold mathematics, please. View it as the anatomy of a great life. This isn't about being some kind of human calculator. It's a deeply human, profoundly beautiful framework for understanding exactly how your legacy can survive the ultimate test of time.
Picture your legacy as a fraction. On the top, you have the numerator. This is your signal quality, your wisdom, your solid judgments, the pure virtue you are actively forging every single day. Right alongside it is resonance, which is how your values connect with the immutable, unchanging essence of humanity. Now look below that at the denominator. This is what's actively trying to drag you down, the entropy of time and the chaos of modernity. The modern world is just this massive storm of nonsense that's constantly trying to inflate that denominator to zero out your value. And here's the kicker. To prevent your legacy from dropping to zero, you can't just ask the world to stop being chaotic. That's never going to happen. Instead, you have to forge such pure virtue and make your signal so incredibly dense that nothing can possibly crush it.
Which brings us to Part 2, Kintsugi of the mind, fusing fragments with the gold of reason.
Let's be real and dissect the cracks in your foundation. You aren't exhausted just because you work too many hours. Actually, scratch that. You're exhausted because you are fighting for things that are completely unworthy of your soul. Every spark of anger, every tremor of anxiety, every desperate, flailing attempt to control what is entirely beyond your reach, these just create deeper and deeper cracks. But we don't hide from them. When a clay vessel breaks, a master craftsman doesn't just throw it in the trash. We use the ancient art of Kintsugi. Step 1. Acknowledge the crack. When fate strikes a blow, do not hide behind denial. Step 2. Fill that crack with the liquid gold of reason by stopping and asking, is this actually within my control? And step 3, if the answer is no, let it pass right through your fingers like sand, But if the answer is yes, you act with the absolute steadiness of a king. This is how you fuse your shattered fragments back together using reason.
And the ultimate result of that process is crystal clear. A human being shattered and then mended by Stoicism is an absolute masterpiece. I want to reassure you right here, right now. You do not need some perfect, unblemished life. Seriously, a human who has never been broken is basically just a fragile plaster statue waiting for a strong breeze to knock it over. But a life that has been shattered, that has survived the fire and been mended by reason and virtue, that is so much stronger. Those cracks aren't signs of failure anymore. They become precious veins of strength. They are undeniable proof of an existence that faced the trial and survived.
Let's move to part 3, building the inner citadel, the absolute sanctuary of the mind. To protect this masterpiece you're creating, you have to fortify your mind, period. The inner citadel is this steel perimeter between what you control and what you do not. It is a completely impermeable sanctuary. Remember that denominator we talked about earlier? The cruelty of time, the unpredictable turning of fate, the loud, constantly shifting opinions of other people? That is literally all just noise outside your gate. You have to emphasize this in your own mind. They might scream at your walls, they might pound on the doors, but they are never, ever allowed inside the sanctuary of your mind.
Take another deep breath with me. Feel that cold, pure air of stillness, the silence you find inside the inner citadel. It isn't the dead silence of an empty room. It's the dynamic silence of the eye of the hurricane. From in there, you observe everything swirling around you, but with eyes entirely free from judgment. You see the impermanence of the world, yet you don't waver an inch. And in this space, you are in great company. You're standing shoulder to shoulder with the ancient Stoics. Think of Marcus Aurelius, who literally wrote his deeply profound meditations on tranquility while he was out commanding armies in a blood-soaked war Kent. You stand with those who consciously chose marble over sand. But remember, my friend, this sacred work takes time. A true legacy is built in every single moment you choose to stand firm when you're in pain, and every moment you choose to actively love your fate. Amor fati. So don't hurry. Look closely at those glowing golden veins in your mind that we just talked about, the ones created by our Stoic Kintsugi. They're undeniable proof of your resilience. They prove that you fought, you hurt, and yet you survived, emerging stronger than ever to perform the most sacred work a human can possibly do, crafting an indestructible soul. Which brings us to the end of our explainer. The heavy gates to the archive are closing and you are safe within your citadel. But I want to leave you with one final provocative question to really linger on. Are you building a legacy of ash or a geometry of meaning? When it's your time to depart, will you leave behind an empty echo of sand or a pure, resonant signal ringing out in the dark of history? Look, we aren't here to escape death or oblivion. This is just the end of the first chapter, the death of the temporary. So do not fear the collapse. It's only when the sand washes away that the true, solid ground is finally revealed. The choice of what to build on it is entirely yours, architect of the eternal.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We are stepping into what our source material calls the silent archive. It's a fascinating concept. The big idea here is that when the ephemeral, fleeting noise of our modern era finally vanishes, what remains is not just emptiness. No, what's left is the primordial essence of being. So, right now, we are entering the heart of the archive to explore the protocol of permanence and figure out how to craft a truly indestructible soul. I want you to think about this question for a second. What will actually remain standing when the sun sets on the final day of this century? Seriously, look at your hands. Think about everything we hustle for every single day, the frantic emails, the daily stresses, those modern metrics of success. It's a chilling thought experiment, right? The text forces us to realize that so much of what we are hurriedly building is, well, it's basically made of sand. We are constantly in motion, but to what end? Okay. Let's dive into this because it brings us to a really fascinating concept called existential debt. It's a brutal paradox, actually. Think about it. We are spending our absolute most precious, finite energy, our metabolic gold, to build sandcastles right on the water's edge. We all know the tide is going to wash them away. We're essentially borrowing our sense of meaning from the transient crowd, from flickering screens, and from the exhausting expectations of a totally chaotic world. A world that was never designed to care about our peace. We're terrified of silence because it forces us to actually look at the emptiness of those illusions. So, how exactly do we fix this? Well, the text gives us a blueprint for escaping the sand and starting to build on solid marble. The whole point is to stop being a helpless victim of time's erosion and start becoming its architect. Let's look at how the source analytically breaks this down. And here it is, the core protocol of the archive, the persistence equation. Now, don't let the variables freak you out. Do not view this as cold, lifeless mathematics. Think of it as the literal anatomy of a great life. LP right here, that stands for your legacy. And understand this, your legacy is not just a list of deeds. It is the quality of the presence you leave in the stream of time. To make sure your legacy doesn't simply drop to zero as time, or t, approaches infinity, you absolutely have to optimize the variables. Now, what's really interesting about this equation is how perfectly it maps out the human struggle. Look at the top, the numerator. This is entirely what we control. SQ is your signal quality. This is your wisdom, your correct judgments, and the pure virtue you forge daily. RN is your resonance, how those values actually touch the immutable essence of humanity. But then, look at the denominator on the bottom. That is what we have to withstand. ET is the entropy of time, and delta C is the chaos of modernity. And let's be honest, the modern world is a total storm of nonsense, constantly trying to inflate that denominator to nullify your value. Which brings us to the crucible. Here is the hard truth. To win this, you cannot simply ask the modern world to stop being chaotic. You can't ask time to stop eroding things. That is a losing battle. You really only have one choice here. You have to make your internal signal, your virtue, your reason, so incredibly dense and pure that absolutely nothing in that denominator can crush it. The source lays out a brilliant step-by-step procedure for doing this, which it calls the Kintsugi of the mind. Every single time fate strikes a painful blow, every time you lose something precious, a crack appears in your soul. Step 1, acknowledge the crack. Do not hide it with denial. Instead, fill that crack with the gold of reason. Step 2, you ask yourself the ultimate Stoic question: is this within my control? And step 3 is the action. If the answer is no, you let it pass, just like sand slipping through your fingers. But if the answer is yes, you act with the absolute steadiness of a king. And doing that is exactly how you transform pain into lasting beauty. The text gives us this incredible, profound realization. A human who has never been broken is merely a fragile plaster statue. A human who has been shattered and mended by Stoicism is a masterpiece. It's amazing, isn't it? Look at those golden veins glowing in the darkness of your mind. They are proof that you fought, that you hurt, and yet you are still here, and you are stronger than ever. So once you've mended those fractures, you have to protect the structure. You establish the fortress. Think of this as the steel perimeter of your newly mended soul, a sanctuary that protects you from external decay. The text calls this the Inner Citadel. It's a hard, impenetrable boundary between the domain of your mind and the chaotic, unpredictable void outside. There's a really stark contrast drawn here. Outside the gate, you have the opinions of others, the unpredictable turns of fate, the cruelty of time, all the world's noise. They can scream all they want, but they are never allowed inside. Inside the sanctuary, only reason, stillness, and careful judgment. And the silence you find inside this inner citadel is not the silence of death or emptiness. No, it is the silence of the eye of the hurricane. It's where you observe everything with eyes completely free from judgment. You see the impermanence around you, yet you do not waver. You feel the weight of the marble in every single decision, solid, heavy, and eternal. Now, my friend, I know this path is not easy. The outside world is probably going to look at your boundaries and call your stillness coldness. They'll look at your self-mastery and call it loneliness. But here, in the hallways of history, we know the actual truth. You are performing the absolute most sacred work a human being can do. You're actively crafting an indestructible soul. So the crucial point to remember is to not hurry. A legacy like this is not built overnight. You don't construct a cathedral in a single day. It is built in every single moment you actively choose not to react to the nonsense. Every moment you choose to stand firm in the face of pain. And every moment you choose to deeply love your fate, what the ancients called amor fati. These deliberate daily choices are what build that pure geometry of meaning over a lifetime. Which leaves us with this final, beautiful question from the archive. Will you leave a silent dot in a noisy world at the base of the statues? Thank you so much for visiting the Silent Archive today and for exploring this explainer with me. Thank you for choosing to be part of the silence that outlasts time. Never forget, you are the only architect of your own cathedral. So walk lightly, breathe deeply, and keep the candle of reason burning bright. If you feel a connection to these stones, leave a small mark, a commitment to yourself. I will be here, quietly observing and guarding your signals. Until the ruins speak again, sleep well, architect of the eternal.
The gates are closed, and you are safe within your citadel.